Highlights from the GT3 Pro race would see Cody Latkovsky starting from pole position. A bad start from the front row though from Max Pfeiffer, dropping back into the clutches of those behind. Yuval Rosen coming through, same with the likes of Zabdir, Vermeulen and Alex Mosen as well. Ian Pfeiffer would make his way past, and Luciano Vitford was fancying his chance to get through on the ailing Pfeiffer. But going into the West Horseshoe, Pfeiffer would bounce back. He'd move up a position and would be straight down the inside of Pfeiffer also to move back up inside the top six. And even before the first lap was over, recovery mode was in full effect. Heading up into the bus stop for the first time, Yuval Rosen was down the inside of Latkovsky to take over the race lead. Meanwhile, Pfeiffer was under pressure from Luciano Vitford, who would get straight to the outside after a poor exit from the bus stop chicane. Rui Felipe would also follow in the slipstream of Luciano Vitford to make up the position, and Ian Pfeiffer was dropping backwards, even into the clutches of Strademans. Whilst Zabdir and Vermeulen were going side by side in the start-finish, Max Pfeiffer decided to try and go through the middle. It wasn't the right decision to be up into the barrier. Thankfully, no damage on his car. Meanwhile, Zabdir was on the attack, straight to the inside of Vermeulen. Contact between the two, and a bit of a half spin for Vermeulen. Once again into the pathway of Pfeiffer, who would lose out to Luciano Vitford. Rui Felipe would be into the side of Ian Pfeiffer, who'd go for a spin right into the clutches of those in the midfield. And then this move from Luciano Vitford, potentially move of the day. Vermeulen a little bit too deep. The up and under pick between the middle of the bus stop chicanes, and boom, there was the position picked up by Luciano Vitford on Axel Vermeulen. Max Pfeiffer would wait behind just for a little bit. Steph Kramers was going a little bit slow in the Porsche over the start-finish line, and he had one car going one way of Chedron down the inside, and then he had Williams going around the outside into the first corner. It would take Williams a little bit longer to complete the move, had to go around the outside of the first into the inside of the International Horseshoe, but the move would be complete, and Steph Kramers would start the lap by losing two positions and effectively one major corner. Hout was under pressure from Martijn, but Martijn might have been feeling it from behind and maybe too much into the rear of Kilian Hout, who was spun back around. Meanwhile, Hennig was also spun around to the background. Yuval Rosen, our race leader, would unfortunately disconnect, which is such a shame, from a dominant position, handing over the race lead to Cody Latkovsky. Meanwhile, Florian Arendt and Rokas de B had started from the back of the field and were both working their way up the order and were on the train for the top 10. Luciano Vitford was under a lot of pressure from Vermeulen, but it would soon become Pfeiffer, who was down the inside of Vermeulen, to take over the position with a big send down to the first corner and to get the opportunity to get past Luciano Vitford immediately after a bit of a mistake down into the International Horseshoe, out a touch wide. You'd have to go around the outside of the kink into the West Horseshoe, but it was the move from Pfeiffer to move him up more spots in the back end of the top 5. The pit window was open. Steph Kramers was trying to come down the inside of Parvin, but Parvin was trying to get to the inside of the pit lane. Meanwhile, Pfeiffer would be the first of those up in the top lot to come into the pit lane, forcing a bit of an undercut. So Zabdir would be into the pit lane, dragging in Luciano Vitford as well. Pfeiffer, though, making that undercut work. He'd already closed in quite a bit on Zabdir after setting fastest lap after fastest lap. And before our race leader came to the pit lane, there was this crash. A Chatso into the side of Ian Pfeiffer, who would get flipped around, and his race going from bad to even worse. Cody Latkovsky on pit entry, down onto the lane. Would it be enough? Would it be too late? The answer was potentially too late. He'd lose the race lead to Zabdir. He'd be down the inside into the International Horseshoe, and Pfeiffer had also joined the battle. A bit of a push, NASCAR style, bump drafting their way around the outside of NASCAR 3 and 4 onto the start-finish straight. Pfeiffer would push through our race leader of Latkovsky and then eventually would take it for himself. A lap later, and Zabdir would be down the inside, not content for third. He'd take over second spot and then would start attacking for the race lead on the start-finish straight that very lap around the outside of Pfeiffer. Then, of course, Latkovsky would be back into the fight, trying to get around the outside. Would be in a little bit too deep with our race leader of Zabdir, and Latkovsky would take it back over again. Pfeiffer up into second position into the slipstream of Latkovsky, but it wouldn't be slipstream for long because Pfeiffer was trying to take over it. He'd get to the inside of Latkovsky and would take over the race lead. Speaking of position switches, Vermeulen would get past Luciano Vitford for fourth position, but would eventually become third because of a penalty late in the race for Latkovsky that he'd only served when he got to the line. This drag race meant almost nothing. Latkovsky would cross the line first but would drop back. Pfeiffer would take 3 race victories on the bounce.